In the endless reaches of the universe, there once existed a planet known as Krypton, a planet that burned like a green star in the distant heavens. There, civilization was far advanced and had brought forth a race of supermen whose mental and physical powers were developed to the absolute peak of human perfection. But there came a day when giant quakes threatened to destroy Krypton forever. One of the planet's leading scientists, sensing the approach of doom, placed his infant son in a small rocket ship and sent it hurtling in the direction of the Earth just as Krypton exploded.
Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and today we're going to be doing a spotlight on story for World of Krypton. Now our story starts in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, in this time where there was this big event called the Clone Wars. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Professor Bill, I know the story of Star Wars, but the title said something significantly different. You're right, but don't be so presumptuous. This is a very different Clone Wars, the Clone Wars of Krypton. All right, now first off, we're going to need a whole lot of backstory for this, but I'm going to try and relegate this as much as possible, okay? Do you guys remember the Richard Donner story, the motion picture for Superman? That was 1979. Pa Kent died, and everybody, like the Man of Steel movie was made much later on, and it was like, Pa Kent died there, Kevin Costner, and everybody's like, but in the original story, his dad didn't die. You're right, in the original story, both of the parents died. You might be sitting here thinking, what's going on? Listen, a whole lot of everything that is a part of the DC Universe. DC Universe, mind you, the most convoluted story of a universe, of a comic book universe in the history of comics. It's also one of the oldest, so it can do whatever it wants. Does that mean it's bad? Not even remotely close. All right? It just makes it so that one story told exactly in the vein of the story preceding it will still be out of continuity with the story before that. Nothing in the DC universe, for the most part, is perfectly aligned with anything else. There's always some kind of a divergence. And what that does is it takes things out of continuity, but at the same time, it does it leaves some things, hard to explain, but it does make for some amazing stories if you're not so rigidly bound to that which came before. So one of the big ways that DC was able to eradicate this idea is the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, remember that Superman motion picture happened in 1979. At the same time that happened was a story called The World of Krypton. Oh, no, not this story, The World of Krypton. Volume 1, which was 3 issues. And it was basically a story, you may have heard it, where Clark Kent, Superman, Kal-El finds the tapes, yes, tapes, it's old, it's 1979 for crying out loud, of Jor-el, where he's talking about the history of Krypton, but it's him telling the story, so it's his perception, his understanding, his take on it, and there is nobody else to give a different history. Imagine if Zod came and gave a different history, right? It would be his version of it, his take on it. So what happens here is we have these 3 stories, and it's basically Jor-el's story. But then, since that was also 1979, 1985 and 86, Crisis on Infinite Earths happened. Now, this is considered the crisis, the ultimate crisis, not the final crisis. No, so far the most recent crisis is called Flashpoint. So the thing called Final Crisis, which happened before that, was not really the final crisis. Now, that being said, the Crisis on Infinite Earths, the chief of these crises, this rewrote the entire DC history. So if the Superman movie and the original, the Volume 1 of World of Krypton, that 3-issue limited series, which mind you is the first limited series that DC Comics had ever produced. Just Jeopardy history there, if Alex Trebek's asked you. Boom, this was completely rewritten now in after, because this is all pre-crisis. Post-crisis is everything that happened after Crisis on Infinite Earths, 85 and 86, specifically 1986, issue 12. The only person who really, truly remembers all these events is Psycho-Pirate, and he's in Arkham, so psst. Anyway, so what happens now is everything is rewritten. So by it being rewritten, There was a new story that came out in 1986, excuse me, called Man of Steel issue number 1. This was kind of redone by Jeff Johns in Superman Secret Origin. All right, but for the most part, it was kept pretty intact. And this is the story of Laura, more specifically, Lara Lorvan. And this is, most you know, I would imagine, this is the mother of Superman. So, okay, this is also the first time that she's ever told a story. This is the first time you ever get her side of the story. Well, the following year, 1986, that's when this story, this Spotlight on story, is revealed. The World of Krypton, Volume 2. This is significantly different in that it has 4 issues in this limited series, but it's significantly different in the telling. So, what happens here is this is the story of Van-El. Now, I feel like I'm late in telling the story. I've been wanting to tell it for a while, but the currently, at the time of me doing this, episode 2 of Krypton, the sci-fi series, is scheduled to come out tomorrow. This is Tuesday. And I have a lot of work to do throughout this week. We got 33 comic books coming out this week that I'm definitely going to be reviewing. Who knows what else I'm going to suddenly decide to review. So I'm going to be very busy this week. So I have to just get this out now. So I don't know what's going to happen in the next issue. But the first episode, has come out. And it's huge. And I realize that they really are basing that sci-fi series off of this story. So that's why this is so important. The big story there is seg-el. They keep on pronouncing it seg-el. It's actually supposed to be seg-el. Now, if anybody who's like really in love with the Superman, I don't want to say true anything. No. Seg-el, when you pronounce it seg-el instead of seg-el, it kind of sounds like John Byrne's original interpretation. John Byrne is the creator of this comic we're doing a Spotlight on story of, Volume 2 of World of Krypton. Seg-el is based off of Jerry Siegel, which is the original creator, the original writer for Superman. So that is huge. That is awesome. God, I love that. Anyway, this right here, World of Krypton Volume 2, is based off of Van-El, a distant, very distant predecessor to the Man of Steel we will eventually know. This is before obviously before the time of Don-El, who in the history of the House of El, he is the one who actually first comes to Earth and realizes that the yellow sun gives him these Superman powers and all that. His father or his grandfather originally gets that information. I wrote a lot of this down so I wouldn't forget. Jor-el the First, which is actually his Don-El's grandfather, first meets with who is it? Starman, with Starman. And Starman, travels through time and he's like, hey, you're the predecessor of Superman. He's the coolest. Yeah, check this out. And he gives him the coordinates for Earth. So the information cycle starts that way. And it's a great backstory to how Jor-el found out about Earth and how to make a ship that can travel through hyperspace in order to get to there. And it got there, perfectly, pretty much exactly where they wanted it to land, By the end of the story, you get to see what I can imagine is Pa Kent. Jonathan Kent, and he, he's just, he's much younger. He's much younger at this point, so traveling through hyperspace takes some time. Anyway, this story is actually going to start off with the story of Van-El right before, I think it's the day before or the day of his coming of age ceremony. So kind of like a bar mitzvah. All right, which is perfect because the Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, they're Jewish, so that's perfect that they have a coming of age festival. Great tribute, great honor that they did this. I didn't get into the creators of the story. Sorry, let me get right into that really quick because it's important to me. So here we go. With Volume 2 of World of Krypton, the writer is John Byrne. Mike Mignola is the penciler. The inker is Rick Bryant. The colorist is, Petra Petra Scotese. The letterer is John Workman, and the editor is Mike Carlin. I also want to, it's not credited here, but I see it in the comic book itself that, back to my, so I can see what I look like. The cover artist is actually John Byrne for this. So he wrote and drew the color. He wrote the story and drew the cover. So that's actually pretty interesting, even though Mike Mignola did the artwork inside. So perfect. After that, Walt Simonson would start joining in to make the covers. Walter Simonson, Thor run. So this is magical. This is magical for me. Anyway, oh, and Walter Simonson's wife, Louise Simonson, would be involved in the death of Superman. So I love the way this works. Anyway, so this story, 1987. Actually December of 1987 through March of 1986. December of 1986 is the first issue, and the fourth issue finishes 4 months later in March of 1987. Excuse me, so this is 86 to 87, this story. Van-El is hanging out. He's got his rite of birth coming up, and this girl Zara is hanging out with him. Vara. Vara's flying around. They got their cars, right? They're flying around. Hey, let's hang out, and she winds up crashing. All right, they're both trying to race each other and mess around. They're flirting. They're thinking that maybe she will be his future intended. Who knows? Who knows? Mind you, this is Let me give you a time frame of when this happened, because this is an ancient predecessor to Superman. 250,000 years ago to the present day in the comic books is when Doomsday was first placed as an infant on Krypton to be eaten over and over again and destroyed by the crazy weather environment and all that crazy stuff. 50,000 years after that is when the Kryptonians themselves would actually develop cloning technology. 100,000 years after that, so 100,000 years from now, from now, yeah, so 100,000 years ago, this is when this story is going to actually start to take place for the most part. So, yeah, interesting, right? Anyway, so clones are a big thing right now, and that's important because Vara actually crashes and she gets jacked up in a really bad way. So she's broken all over the place, and he rushes her to the genetic the genetic house, the house where the clones are all kept. Each person is given a 3 clones, so direct from their DNA. 3 clones are made for them. You can always make more; it's not a big deal, but these are ready-made clones, various age cycles. You know what I'm saying? So that you maintain youth this way. So you're virtually immortal at this point, as long as your head doesn't get blown off, so that they can't maintain your headspace memory. That's because at the time people used to think that if you cut off the head and cryo freeze them, that's how you can clone people. Turns out, yeah, no, that's not actually going to work. Sorry. So all those people who did that, anyway, that's IRL in real life. Anyway, so what happens at this point? You have they also use this for if you get some kind of disease, or if you get like a limb cut off or anything, any reason something happens to you, they've got these clones, and they're kept mindless inside this cryo state, whatever. So they fix her, and she's almost immediately healed, like hours later it seems, if that. You know what I'm saying? It almost feels like you turn the page and she's okay. Anyway, so she's back to normal. She's like, hey, it's cool. And this one cat is in there, Ken Z. Now, Ken Z is saying that he is from the house of Ran-el also. Ran-el is actually the father of, directly the father of, what's his name, Van-el. So this is interesting that Ken Z, he's definitely from a different house, but there's some kind of a relationship there, and we don't know. The history of the DC Universe, like I said, is extremely convoluted, okay? But this is post-crisis, so it still technically exists after Rebirth. New 52 couldn't do anything to this. Anyway, not for more than 5 years at least. Anyway, so they fix her with a clone, but Ren-el is in there and he's kind of like nervous and freaked out, and he's waiting for some information. These robots, there's these robot caretakers that take care of everybody. Now they are, for the most part, completely owned by these Kryptonians, and they're called humans here, but just you get it, right? It's just the time period. They just call them humans, but they are absolutely Kryptonians. They just didn't have that name for them, really. They didn't give them that name like that. So they're not going to become evil. You know, they're not all like the Eradicator. Okay. Anyway, so they move into the side and they're like, oh yes, Mr. Kanzi, we've actually confirmed your suspicions. He's like, no. Oh my God, they just make it. He goes running out and he's you know, it's freaky, man. So anyway, they have no idea what this is all about. So they go to the coming of age party, the bar mitzvah, for Van-el. Now at this party, a whole bunch of people are talking. They're obviously using this as some kind of a social event. You know what I'm saying? And they're hanging out and whatnot. And all of a sudden, first off, Nira is there. Nira is the mother of Kanzi. So Kanzi comes in with a gun. He's freaking out. He's like, Mom, how could you do this? And walks up to her, and Van-el comes running up. He's like, back off, man, or this is going to happen to you. Boom. He puts the gun to his mother's head, and shoots her. So, like I said earlier, blow off her head. She can't be recloned. She's done. Her memories are gone. There's no way to replicate her. It would just be an automaton of her, you know, floating around. So then he turns around and he goes to put up to his head, but Van is able to run up and, you know, boom, shoulder blocks him. I guess he's been watching American hockey. Anyway, takes him down. The laser blast actually shoots right out of the walled city and all that stuff, because it is still pretty dangerous outside. Anyway, so these knuckleheads go and arrest him, or, you know, pull him away. Like, you know, you just committed a murder, and this is a true murder. This isn't like you beat somebody up and, okay, we clone you and you're fine again. No. You actually murdered this person. There's no way to bring her back, and it's your mom, dude. Well, Ren-el and his son Van-el decide to go and figure out what's going on. They go back to the cloning facility, and, you know, like, he was distraught because of such and such, and the computers are trying to figure out what's going on, and finally it comes to the conclusion. And they've been trying to keep some of this information private, because even though they're dead, the last person who apparently was supposed to be dead has been reported dead, and it is the bride, the fiancée, I should say, of Kanzi. So Kanzi was about to get married, but it turns out he went and killed her. Same exact way he killed his mom. Then he goes and he kills his mom at the coming of age party for Van-el. Then he tries to kill himself, doesn't, and he winds up, you know, being arrested or whatever. Nobody knows what happens to him after that. So they're like, what's going on? They're like, oh, well, we just did a genetic search, and it turned they just informed him earlier that they did the search. So they're like, we just did a genetic search, and it turns out that the genetics of Kanzi's bride-to-be, is actually the exact genetic match of Nira, his mother. And also it turns out that the youngest of those 3 clones that are supposed to be there for her has turned out missing. She checked out the clone. So now here's the thing. It's illegal to check out your own clones. It's illegal, but it's still your clone. So you're allowed to do it. The robots won't stop you, but the people will arrest you for it. You know what I'm saying? You will be charged with a crime for doing it. It's all about, you know, you're not allowed to do these things, but if you do, then we're going to get you in trouble. It's not like there's no stopgap there. You know what I'm saying? It's just your own sense of, you know, be cool. So now they realize what happened here. His mother was always very protective. Nira, the mother of Kanzi, was always protective of Kanzi. And what happens here is she figures nobody is good enough. I'm trying to find somebody good enough for my son. I can't, but I'm technically good enough. But that would be freaky if it was actually her. So she checks out her own clone and allows it to become sentient. Fakes it that it's a part of another house and says, here you go, son. Yeah. Come on, you know that's just as freaky gets. Anyway, so aside from this Desperate Housewives style scandal. I never actually watched the show, so I could be wrong. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. This freaky incident. That's, for the most part, it for this life cycle. But they do try to keep this stuff under wraps because like 100,000 years ago when they started doing this cloning technology, there were people who didn't appreciate this. There was a movement that was started, and they said, listen, taking clones like this is not cool. Now, it's interesting how this kind of models real life, right? And the real discussions for cloning and whatnot didn't come into fruition until around the late 90s, early 2000s. But nonetheless, and then they're turned into stem cell research and controversies there, which I just don't understand. But hey, I think that the reason why they argue is that they don't understand the science behind it. But hey, that's just me. Anyway, so these people who the regular city dwellers are calling clonies, like, oh, the clonies, they're talking about clone rights. They're not sentient, but these other guys are saying they're clearly sentient because if they weren't, they couldn't achieve sentience. You see what I'm saying? So like a plant, you let a plant go free, you let a plant do whatever it wants, it's not going to become a sentient being. It's not going to become self-aware, but these clones can be made self-aware, so we shouldn't be using clones. Well, there winds up being a battle at this point, and it winds up becoming really bad. In fact, very quickly, they wind up detonating a device in Kandor. Yeah, the idea of the bottled city of Kandor taken away by Brainiac, that, again, very convoluted history. Okay, so it is what it is. And some people try to rectify it. Some people have convoluted that also. So it is what it is. Anyway, they detonated a nuclear device inside of Kandor. I think it was called the Destructor, something to that effect. Anyway, so this starts off a huge war. These people actually wind up leaving. They leave on their own, like, we shouldn't mess with clones. So a huge battle. The city folk wind up deciding that, you know what, this just isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. We're going to let this go. The fighting has gotten way too bad. So let's just end this war, and we give up. We won't use clones anymore. They instead start using cyborg technology. Oh, if you lose a body part, replace it with robotics. Is what it is. That's still not good enough for these clonies, but at the same time, it's better than actually messing with clones. They want it to just be a natural life cycle where you live, you age, and you die. All right, you had your life. Let it go, man. Which I guess is fine, but stop trying to make other people live your life. You're saying that's the way you want to live. Cool, man, but shut up. Anyway. So they live and die a regular life cycle of 100 something years, whatever, you know what I'm saying, 125 years maybe. But as for the regular city dwellers, they still have perpetual immortality. So this battle alone, this war, this clone war, actually goes over thousands of years. So anyway, all this crazy stuff is happening, and finally they're about to go up and actually give the proper surrender, but that's when the bombing happens. Just for the sake of conversation, Vara's like, okay, I'm actually taking the side of the clonies, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe in any of this anymore. This isn't cool, and I wish I could have ripped these clone parts right out from me, but anyway, so she leaves. What do you call it? Van-El becomes one of the head generals in this fighting, and he actually comes across her later on in this group of pacifists who don't want to get involved, but they don't want to be, they're not going to get involved in the fighting, but they're definitely not on the side of the city folks. They believe in the whole cloning mentality, but they're not going to fight. They're pacifists. So, Van-El is able to break through the ranks, and when he gets there, he sees her, and she kicks him between the legs and runs off. Hey, man. So anyway, and the roof falls on top of her as she's leaving in the war, and she dies very ambiguously, and he's like, nah. So he goes off and marries somebody else, whatever, has kids, obviously, because he is a descendant of an ancestor of Superman. So this war has been going on forever, and finally it's like, okay, listen, we have discovered information that this group, they're what do you call it? They're planning on actually destroying the planet itself. We've got to go and figure it out. We've got to figure out what's going on here. We need these guys to give us information where we can find this organization. This organization is actually called Black Zero. Again, convoluted. There was originally a character named Black Zero, then there's this group called Black Zero, and then there's another character, Black Zero, and then there's this alien invasion called Black Zero, and then there's this device called Black Zero. I think there's even a robot called Black Zero. Like, find different names and stop confusing us. Pretty please. So this organization, Black Zero, they're responsible. They're going to try and destroy Krypton itself. Like, this is a bridge way too far. You know, like, this is too much, man. You don't agree with my beliefs, I'm going to take out everybody. Dude, seriously? Seriously. So he travels, Van-El travels all the way in his battle suit, and you've seen this battle suit before if you've read the Rebirth of Superman, Superman Returns. This is the suit that he was in, where he was trying to absorb as much energy solar energy as he possibly could, and came out of the suit in the black suit Superman, the coolest looking suit ever. Anyway, comes out and he before he redons the red tights, which is happening again now. So he goes and he's talking to these people. He's trying to talk to these people. But he's been for 30 days pretty much inside this suit, just walking to get to this area. It's very hostile. Krypton is a very hostile environment. So he finally gets there. He can barely talk. He gets taken to this leader. She's all like, well, you're a city folk, and the only way that you're valuable to us is by being able to speak. So if you can't speak, that's not good, dude. They're probably going to kill you. So he's forcing himself to speak, wrecking his voice. And he's like, okay, listen. And he's like, well, listen, one of you guys, but in the Black Zero movement, I know you guys are the pacifist types, you know what I'm saying? But one of you cloney types, you won, but the Black Zero, they're going to try and destroy the planet. I need your help to try and find this guy. So they both don battle suits and they go off and they're able to find this guy. And it turns out it's Ken Z. Yeah, he survived. He survived. So Ken Z's like, yeah, I'm going to definitely destroy this place, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. In fact, watch this. And he sets off the device. It's this big, beautiful egg. No, it's not plastic, man. And they, if you read Dark Knight's Metal, you know what I'm talking about. So they're just like, what? So what do you call it? Van-El turns his device towards this thing and just boom, starts blowing, but it blows up right in front of his face. Now it already started, so it started, wrecking the towards the core, this beam towards the core, but he destroys it. So it was supposed to destroy the planet instantly, but he stops it just in time. Anyway, so bada boom, blows up right in his face, and this girl who was helping him kills Ken Z, but what do you call it? His son, Van-El's son, jor-el, he comes along and he's like, Father, are you okay? Rips him out of his suit and he's like, yeah, just a flesh wound, and doesn't really say that, just my mind. And he's like, oh, the girl, where is she? And she's like, oh man, you've changed so much. It's like, wait, what? You really do know me? He's like, yeah, but you're not going to be able to fix me this time. And she dies. And that's when he realizes, yeah, this was Vara. Oh, man. So she made it. She made it out, that original girl. And she actually dies in what looks like the exact same position where she was broken. And he had to go and fix her with the clone body. So, yeah, like, this is really messed up, dude. Anyway, this whole thing leads into thousands of years later, like almost 100,000 years later, pretty much, and the time of Jor-el, the father of Superman. And he's an astute study, and he's supposed to be betrothed to Lana, eventually his wife. And this story is cool because it kind of it does actually follow the Man of Steel issue #1 that had happened just the year before, just earlier that year, but yeah, the year before. The story I was telling you about quickly, that Lana was actually giving, Superman's mother gave the recounting of that story, not Superman's father. But she in that story tells the story that she was not originally supposed to be engaged to Jor-el. There was actually somebody else. What do you call it? His name was zon-em. So the House of M. Interesting, right? That's also in the sci-fi story. Anyway, so but so here they kind of follow up on that. It's like, oh, the guy, he actually wound up dying from this this plague that's out. It's called the Green Plague. You know, tens of thousands of Kryptonians, humans, Kryptonians are dying because of this green plague. It's the strangest thing. So, her mother wants you to be the next person. You guys are identical, not identical, but you guys are perfect genetic matches also, just like Zom was. So, Zon, right? Yeah, Zon. Anyway, he's obscure. So says, oh yeah, cool. Hey, can I see her? And he's really breaking protocol. So she shows a hologram. He's like, she's a hottie. So he really falls in love with her. Like, that's something that, understand, for the most part, Kryptonians are sterile at this point. You know what I'm saying? I know in the Superman Man of Steel movie, they had a child the natural way. It's still this way. Kryptonians are sterile at this point. But because they're sterile in the sense of their emotions. Nobody loves each other anymore. In fact, you almost never get the opportunity to see another Kryptonian at this point. You're always isolated, and everything's done through holographic interference and whatnot, and interface, not interference, interface and whatnot. And you very rarely actually meet with each other. But anyway, so they do, because he actually loves her, and she winds up loving him also eventually, because she's shocked at this emotion that no one else ever expresses. So anyway, yeah, this story is pretty much going to end, and it's going to end in the birth of Superman and his, Kal-El and his rocket off to Earth. But in the meantime, it turns out that this green plague is actually a result of that initial burst 100,000 or so years ago, just under 100,000 years ago. Excuse me. So perhaps 90,000 years ago. So they that energy was supposed to instantly destroy Krypton, but since it was destroyed so quickly, the energy didn't immediately destroy the planet, but it's still heading towards and building up to destroy the planet. So it's still heading towards the core. So jor-el finds out about this. He understands this by being a historian, and his intended Lana is a librarian. So both of those, that helps out a lot. Anyway, discovers that, oh man, but he discovers it like it took him 30 days. Once he affirmed it, he confirmed it. It took him 30 days to get back. He's like, the planet's probably going to be destroyed today. Let's get Clark out of here. Kal-El out of here. So yeah, man, like it's a wicked story, the thing is actually supposed to be turning the core of Krypton into a form of metal. So, and since this is called a green plague that's going out before the planet actually destroys, I'm presuming that they mean it's supposed to be green kryptonite. So that's very interesting to say the least. Listen, this is 4 stories. Issue 1 was just released free at the time of, actually about 2 weeks before the time that I'm releasing this video on that Saturday. So you can get issue 1 for free. But to get all of them, guys, there are links below to get all 4 issues digitally or, physically, whatever. But this is a really cool story about Van-El. I know they give it as the immediate father of seg-el, but it's not actually seg-el as they give it here. It's not actually the case in the comics, but these stories are clearly going to relate back to what you'd already seen. On top of that, I just released today the making of this. As I'm making this video, I'd already earlier today released what's his name? What the heck is his name? Adam Strange. Love that character. I'm just rushing now. Explained in a minute. So that's out. And by the time that this video is released, I'm expecting that I'm going to have released Brainiac. Explained in a minute. For me, it's a spoiler, but you're not going to see this until Saturday anyway. Anyway, you're probably watching this a year later, so whatever. Time being what it is, this is my plan. So that's it for me. Guys, check out the links below. Help support the channel. And that's it for me. Guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Hope you enjoyed this. Class dismissed.